pleased to be having this collaboration with the Toronto Regional Library, that's the National Library Board, and the National Book Development Council support to have this book launch that's so appropriate as we start the Earth Week. My name is Evelyn Wong, and I'm the moderator. Very informal afternoon together, and it's just my pleasure to introduce the author of this fantastic book that I think Sylvain is circulating about. Is it? Yes, or we can circulate a copy for you. It's the diversity of life on Earth from heritage to extinction. And you can see it's a beautiful book, and I won't preempt what he'll be presenting. But we're very pleased to be able to organize this launch today, and to have Sylvain first present, and then I guess Professor Peter Lewis on the National University of Singapore. So I am a volunteer with the Book Development Council, working with this Asian Festival of Children's Content, which is looking at children's literature from and about Asia. It's celebrated in the world. But my work in the area of sustainable development and corporate social responsibility has been a very happy association of having met Sylvain. Sylvain is the sustainability director at the Siloso Beach Resort on Sentosa Island. How many of you have been to Sentosa? Okay. And how many of you have been to Siloso Beach Resort? All right. Okay. This is pretty good. Cool. So if you haven't, that is the next place of destination when you're at Siloso Beach Sentosa, because it is one of the most eco-friendly and designed resorts. And actually, I don't think coincidentally, but we do have the managing director of the resort here, Calvin, in here, with us. But Sylvain is a specialist in not only CSR, but actually in his heart, since he was, I can't say, at birth probably, right? An environmentalist and a scientist by training. He has studied in France, Australia, and Canada, specializing in this field. And it's been a lifetime of passion and very rigorous knowledge, expertise that has developed over the years, that he has accumulated so much material that he has come to share with us so much in this book. And I'll leave Sylvain to tell us more about that background. And so I think without further delay, I would ask Sylvain to just highlight to us the inspiration behind the book and what the book is about. And then we'll continue. And before you be prepared to ask your questions and share your comments and experiences on this theme of biodiversity, environmental sustainability, and the future of our fragile planet. So if I can, please say something.
Hello? Hello. Well, thank you very much, Evelyn, for this very nice introduction. So today I will try just to give you a very brief overview of what this book is about, pretty much, and how it came to be, as well as the motivations behind it and what you can expect throughout the content of this book. So I'd just like to start the presentation by saying that there's actually a lot of publications available on the topic of biodiversity. There's a lot of scientific work which are published every year, but in my opinion, a lot of the scientific work tends to remain within the scientific community. It goes out sometimes, but most of the work is not so well communicated to the general public. There's also a lot of general works which are of various sorts, which are published on surrounding concepts of biodiversity. But it's quite rare that the approach is very, very holistic in nature. So this is actually the basic concept behind this book, was to try in a single document to gather a lot of life experiences and to provide in a very simple way content that will be understandable to a very general public, surrounding concepts of biodiversity in a very structured way, covering as much as possible topics surrounding the concept of biodiversity. So just a bit of background about myself. I had the chance throughout the years to live in different countries and did a fair bit of travel, and I came across a number of personal experiences since very young, which I believe played a significant role for me to come with such a document. I knew a lot of places when I was young which were very rich in biodiversity, and which I came to know very well, and I came back to these places many years after that, and I really noticed the impacts that various human developments had on these resources. So I guess this really inspired me to publish this book. And since also very young, I became interested in photography, and I accumulated over the years a lot of pictures from around the world on landscapes and a lot of species, of course, and to the point that I accumulated so many pictures that I really wanted to do something with it, but I wasn't sure what. So I started to come with this idea in 2009, and just nicely 2010 was the International Year of Biodiversity. So I thought that perhaps that would be my opportunity to make use of this information and pictures that I had. So today, since we are celebrating Earth Hour in Singapore, I would like to just put the book into context and to highlight the fact there's actually a lot of links. There's a lot of links to Singapore with this book. First of all, when I developed the book while I was in Singapore, so the Lego deposit is with the National Library of Singapore. But there's also a website which is dedicated to this book, and I will come back to this a bit later on. But there's also a lot of case studies throughout this book which showcase Singapore as an example to highlight various key points that I'm trying to make regarding biodiversity. I really believe that despite the fact that in Singapore most of the very rich biodiversity that this country had has been lost over the years. First of all, through agricultural developments in the early days, and then, of course, until now, through intense developments. I really believe that Singapore is doing a great job in terms of showcasing what can be done in very densely populated environments to preserve what remains of biodiversity. And there's a lot of case studies which portray Singapore to this regards in this book. And I hope that this book would actually play a small contribution in making Singapore an educational hub on the concept of biodiversity. I would like to now to really showcase what's inside the book through the various chapters and then what you can expect from the book. First of all, I started this book with the first chapter, which really tries to highlight that there really has been key dates and discoveries made over the past few hundred years on the concept of natural history, and which has brought us to the modern concept that we have of biodiversity. So from discoveries of microorganisms to key findings such as the discovery of DNA to the build-up of the theories of natural selections and so on. So this first chapter is really about providing a bit of background history on natural history. I then move on to highlight the fact that most life on Earth is concentrated in a few ecosystems. We live in a very diverse world, but life on Earth is not uniformly distributed at all. We tend to find much more life in various ecosystems on Earth. So in this chapter, I really try to highlight that what are these main ecosystems, from a dense rainforest to coral reef to various isolated ecosystems such as mountain tops or seamounts or seagrass beds, which are known to hold a higher degree of biodiversity. Sorry, there's also a chapter in the early stage of this book which tries to define what is biodiversity. So I try in a very simple way to define the concept, and then I'll go through the... I think we lost the mic, so if you can hold me, I will just continue. Thank you. So in this chapter, I really try to highlight in a very concise way how diverse the life on Earth is, going through the different types of life forms, from microorganisms to large mammals and everything in between. In the fourth chapter of this book, I start to bring humans into the picture, having started the book by giving a bit of information and background on how diverse life on Earth is and where life on Earth is found. I really try in this chapter, and this is the most content-intensive section of the book, to go through the main pressures that we humans have on the environment, and especially biodiversity resources. So in this section, I go through some of the main impacts that we associate with biodiversity loss, such as massive deforestations or forest fires, up to more global issues such as climate change. In the next section, I use specific case studies which have been associated in the past with significant loss of biodiversity in specific locations, such as major oil spills or other impacts. But what I'm really trying to convey in this chapter is that, in my opinion, we really have shifted from what used to be isolated extinction events to a global loss of species on Earth, which is really the combined effect of all anthropic activities that we have been putting on the environment since mostly the Industrial Revolution. In the next chapter, I try to highlight that there's a lot of studies which have been done that can actually showcase, we can actually measure through the use of various indicators that species on Earth are becoming extinct. We are losing species very fast, not just in specific locations, but throughout ecosystems. There's many works that I could have used to showcase this specific fact, but I chose to use the results from WWF because I find that they're just clear in the results. But there's actually a number of scientific works of various types which showcase the same thing. We are really at a point in time where we are running out of time if the idea is to preserve as many species as possible. So if we are going to succeed in doing just that, to preserve as many species as possible, then perhaps we should concentrate on areas around the world which are known to have a higher degree of biodiversity, but at the same time which are also known to have higher pressures. And because funds for conservation are limited, then perhaps we should adopt this approach. And this is also what the concept of a hotspot highlights. In the next chapter, I really try in a very simple way to answer the question why. We often hear about the impacts of biodiversity, but it's very difficult for most people to relate to the simple question why we should preserve biodiversity and how does this impact our daily lives as humans. Well, there's actually a number of reasons for this, and in this chapter I try to choose specific aspects which can impact people's mindset into why we should preserve biodiversity. For instance, all our medicines are derived from species, from compounds found within species. So of course, if we keep on losing biodiversity at the rate that we are now, we also lose the potential to to develop remedies and medicines from these compounds. We hear a lot in the news like problems with so-called superbugs, and that we are running out of critical medicines to deal with a common disease. So this is just one of the examples that we're not going to find the solutions by ourselves. So unless we are able to derive knowledge from species, well, we are heading for troubles in the future. There's a range of other significant benefits for humans, such as all agricultural systems depend on a variety of species. So if we lose these interactions between species, all our agricultural systems will be in trouble as well. Of course, there's a lot of knowledge which is lost in the process, general knowledge that we could derive for a number of applications. We might not be quite sure what yet, but what we know is that if we lose the knowledge bank, well, we will never know. In the next chapter, I go on to really providing simple solutions that can be adopted at the government, the individual, but also at the private sector level to deal with issues and how we could adapt and try to reduce the loss of species on Earth. So this chapter is really about solutions. Throughout my life, I came across a number of statements which don't make much sense to me. So I really tried to, in this chapter, in a very simple way, to provide simple answers to comments such as it does not matter to lose biodiversity because it does not affect us, or we will be able to see animals in museums, so why bother to see it in nature? Such comments like this, which really it can easily be demonstrated that they are wrong. There's a number of topics which are covered in this book which may not be seen to be related to biodiversity, such as energy use or water management or a range of other aspects. And this really highlights actually the main point which I'm trying to make throughout this book. If there's one point to retain, which I try to do, is that I don't believe that the future of conservation is just to focus on the preservation of specific areas of land or ocean, but we should instead, in addition of doing this, adopt a much more holistic approach, and societies should shift to much more sustainable business development models by changing our practices at all levels, from the choice that we make in our energy use to how we manage water resources and so on, because if we really think about it, all our activities have, in the end, significant impacts on biodiversity resources. As I said at the beginning of this talk, there's a strong link between this book and its associated website, and I invite you all to go and see the URL. But just a bit of a history on the name. This website is called the Biodiversity Portal of Singapore, and often I've been asked why is it called the Biodiversity Portal of Singapore? Well, especially now, since that this website has become more international in nature. The reason is simply that it started as a Singapore-based initiative, and that we did get a lot of support from organizations in Singapore which are leading in this area. So we just started as a Singapore-based initiative, and then grew up to a more international platform. But that's the history behind the name. Okay, I would just like to finish by this pre-talk by just acknowledging a few people which have made this book possible. First of all, this book would not have been possible without external financial contribution from Mr. Banki. I would also like to thank Peter for being here today, and for the foreword, and Professor Leo Tan as well from NUS. I would like to thank my editor and publisher, Green Prince, and the Green Brunei editorial team, as well as the sponsor for the development of the website from Silozovic Resort, and Mr. Ong and Kelvin from the resort. Also today's event, the National Library Board, as well as the Book Council, the Singapore Environment Council for the coverage and promotion. Also, I would like to thank Evelyn, of course, for her contribution and for being here today, as well as all the partners, both international and local, which have supported this website. So thank you very much, and I'm sure Peter can has interesting things to say. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sylvain. Was that interesting? Are you taking photos? Are you going to get your book soon? And you as well? You just have to keep all the photos and ideas that you have now, and we'll be back here for the launch of your story and research. But you'll notice that what Sylvain had mentioned is a foreword to the book, having been written by Professor Peter Ng. And we really are very honored, and it's a pleasure to have Prof. here with us, and also Professor Leo Tan. I think many of you might see both of them often in the news. And if I could say for Prof. Leo Tan, we're chairman of the National Parks, right? And I mean, I think we talk about the city and the garden, but you were saying no, it should be, no, the garden city, but it should be the city and the garden. City in the garden, and that's Singapore as we're coming to know it. And I think for the younger generation here, that's what you assume, right? Singapore's in a big garden, and the gardens by the bay, I think, is something that you've seen, coming forward, probably much because of the advocacy and the work we've been doing. So, Prof. Leo Tan is at the Department of Biological Sciences at NUS, as is Professor Peter Ng. And Peter. When we met today, he gave such a grip on the handshake that I was told it was his childhood sort of love of the crab. His early career was exploring the diversity of crabs. But he is a world-renowned authority on the subject. But he's also a local heritage prize winner for unearthing Singapore's endemic and highly endangered species in that area. But since then, I mean, his broad knowledge in marine biology and so much else that I would have to leave you to check his profile, because it really is quite outstanding. But he has won a number of citations and awards for his work in biodiversity, conservation, and ecology. And I think your current portfolio, is the director of the Raffles Museum. So that is the Raffles Museum of Biodiversity Research, and also the Tropical Marine Science Institute. He's authored and edited numerous publications, guidebooks, and most recently the Singapore Biodiversity and Encyclopedia of the Natural Environment. And there is a website also on the Singapore Biodiversity, so it's very complementary with these two that are sharing their knowledge and expertise with us today. But I just want to close by saying that for Prof. having written the foreword, I learned in meeting these two that actually he first met Sylvain when he was, how old are you? Primary 4, and how old was that? About 9 or so? 11? Okay, well, I think you were about 7 years old, wasn't it? 6 or 7 years old. Yeah, that is when we first met, and I think you can share with us a little more about how that came about. Yes. And the parents, I mean, we always have to thank our parents, and Sylvain's father, Bertrand, and your mom, I think Prof. is going to tell us a little more about that as well in his remarks as the speaker. And after that, we'll be welcoming you both on stage for an open discussion with you. Anything, think about questions you want to ask about Singapore, about Southeast Asia, about Asia, and the world. Okay, right, Tom?
Good afternoon. When Sylvain and Evelyn asked me to say a few words this afternoon, of course, as usual, I stumped. What on earth do I say, right? And I was still thinking as of 5 minutes ago what to say. So I've been taught by one very well-known gentleman in Singapore. He says, always try to say as much as you can in 2 or 3 points. So after 5-10 minutes, I do it in 2 or 3 points. Evelyn alluded to the fact that there are a lot of fates and destinies involved here, right? And many of us don't believe in fate and destiny for those of us from more scientific backgrounds. Unfortunately, it affects us regardless of what we believe. A long time ago, when Singapore was a much more peaceful place and simple place, a young man, about this high, I think, was with his family in a nice hotel in Singapore. Sylvain's father is a very old friend of mine. Both of us like exploring the world, looking for crabs, because we like crabs. His father is an old friend. When I first met him 20 over years ago, or longer, I lost track of time, right? Sylvain made an immediate impact on us after he and his father and I were having coffee and chit-chatting. He made an impact by crashing through the hotel window, glass. You know, some of these glass doors hotels have, he went right through it. He didn't cry, but his parents freaked out, of course. So the conversation on crabs stopped. He quickly bundled him up, brought him to the hospital. And his father and mother began to realize that the Singapore medical system is very efficient. So they sewed him up, right? And that crashing through a glass wall in Singapore 20 over years ago obviously anchored him to Singapore. His father has been working with me in Singapore on and off, here and there, for the last 20 over 30 years. His father will begin next week, in fact, when we do a survey of all the marine biodiversity in Singapore. His father is an expert on the boat, looking for animals in the deep sea. He's what we call a dredge master. He's very good at looking for strange animals in the sea. Over these years, Sylvain, of course, graduated, ended up here, finding jobs. He worked at NEA for a while, then got bored, or Singapore Environment Council for a while. Then got bored and joined the private sector as a sustainable advisor. This book is a strange book. I wrote it in the foreword and I'll say it again now because this is a book which is actually, not to insult Sylvain, it's a very straightforward book. Everything you will read in there, everything you will see in there, you will find it in websites and you've been told by your teachers, told by your friends, you've read lots of books about it. There are 1,001 pieces of information out there that tells you what's going wrong in this planet. It's like the nose on your face. It's right in front of you, but you never see it. What Sylvain has done, he has put it all together in a story that is very close to his heart. When he wanted to do this 3 years ago or whatever, my first question to him is why? You know? Is this a scientific book? Not really. Is it just lots of color pictures? Not really. None of the above. And all of the above. So it's a good way of looking at the world in context. And he sort of zooms in straight to Singapore. Why? This is a globalized world. Everything is connected. Singapore is a globalized city. We are very well connected. If the planet goes crazy, we also die. The country, this small island, is so connected to the rest of the world that whatever happens affects us. One of my friends told me the stocks of certain companies went down a few days ago. Why? Because their head office is based in Boston. What on earth do two jokers in Boston doing stupid things have got to do with big companies in Singapore? Everything, maybe. The world is connected. The planet is connected. It's a nice book because it makes you feel good and also makes you sad. Last thing I want to say very briefly, I've been told I only have 5 minutes. Okay? I'm very long-winded. When you talk about fates and destinies, it's a bit strange that you have a Frenchman, a very globalized Frenchman, write a book about biodiversity of the world, zooming into Singapore. But if you look at his history, his parents' history with us, with me, with Singapore, with all the things we do in Singapore, you find that everything is connected. It's almost fated, right? 20 over years ago, I would never imagine this young man would do something like this. The future, of course, therefore, is also linked to young people about this hike now. The future, of course, is not my problem. I'm going to drop dead very soon one of these days, right? Even Sylvain is in the middle-aged so-so group, right? His time is also limited. We face lots of problems. A book like this hopefully will inspire, get young people excited to want to do something. I wrote in the foreword that we all want to change the world, to make the world better, right? But we are going down a very slippery slope, I'm afraid. We have to do some very dramatic things in years and decades ahead, right? The old guard had to change. Middle-aged guard, so-so. The young are opportunities galore. So we lay the responsibility to all those people here which are about 1.5 meters and lower in height. Has to be. It's always been that way. All right? I hope the book does its job. I think it will do its job. Even in all this.
What a wonderful way to start opening it up for questions from you and you. All those above 1.5 meters. 1.5. Below. No, above also. Above. But it's very appropriate that this launches here at the Jurong Regional Library, because I think many of you may know, but they are going to be launching the environmental collection at the Jurong Regional Library sometime in 2013. So for all the libraries in Singapore, Jurong Regional Library will be the repository specifically specializing in environmental resources. And they are welcoming actually the NLP collaborations with the community, with universities, with the individuals, everyone to kind of just come and do more, to raise awareness and on this whole challenge that's before us. And I think it's very appropriate that Prof. and Sylvain has set this platform that perhaps we could talk about is what can we do? What can we do to make that difference? Here in Singapore, there's Jurong Lake here. This launch is supported by the Singapore Environment Council. Is it that you got bored or you just have more things to do, right? Okay, so we'll be talking, asking about the SEC because they have a collaboration with the PUB on the water trails, the ABC water trails, and they've got wonderful materials here for secondary students to take these tours and we can as well. But it's my pleasure then to invite both Sylvain and Prof. to the stage to ask you about the questions, and you might want to talk a little more about how you developed the book together with the website to be an educational platform. I mean, maybe that's something that you could talk about. When, that's my first question. But can we ask you to come here? So get ready with your thoughts, comments, questions. That was a